Lecture 8. Applying Propp and Bremond to Film and Television. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Lecture 8. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of narrative theory, specifically how the frameworks developed by Vladimir Propp and Claude Bremond can unlock the underlying mechanics of modern storytelling in film and television. These aren't just academic exercises. Understanding Propp and Bremond gives us powerful analytical tools to dissect why certain stories resonate, how plots are constructed, and where contemporary media is pushing the boundaries of traditional narrative. Over the next 18.5 minutes, we'll explore Propp's focus on functional sequences and Bremond's emphasis on branching logic. We'll see how their theories reveal the skeletal structure beneath the flesh of film and TV narratives, using plenty of case studies to illustrate their analytical strengths and their limitations. Propp in modern media functions as formula. Let's start with Vladimir Propp. For those of you who might recall our earlier discussions, Propp was a Russian folklorist who, in the 1920s, analyzed 100 Russian fairy tales and discovered a consistent, underlying structure. He identified 31 recurring functions or actions that characters perform, regardless of who the characters were or what they looked like. These functions, always appearing in the same sequence, formed the bedrock of his narrative model. While his work originated in folklore, Propp's 31-function model remains incredibly influential, especially in plot-driven genres and hero-centric narratives within blockbuster cinema. Think of it as a narrative blueprint that many successful films unconsciously or consciously follow. Propp's functions in blockbuster cinema. Let's consider some classic Proppian elements you'll immediately recognize. Preparation. This is often where a lack or an act of villainy disrupts the equilibrium of the hero's world. Think of Thanos snapping his fingers in Avengers, Infinity War, immediately establishing a massive lack for the universe. Struggle. This is the heart of the hero's journey, where they confront obstacles, face trials, and engage with the antagonist. Think of Rey's arduous training and growing powers in Star Wars. The Force awakens as she prepares to confront the First Order. Resolution. Finally, order is restored, the lack is overcome, and the villain is vanquished. The Avengers' eventual victory in Endgame, bringing everyone back and defeating Thanos, is a textbook Proppian resolution. Let's dig into a more specific example. Denis Villeneuve's Dune, 2021. The film's first act aligns remarkably closely with Propp's functions. Case study, Dune, 2021, Proppian analysis. Function 1, absentation. This is where a family member or hero leaves home, or something is absent. In Dune, this is subtly played out through Paul's visions of Chani and Arrakis. These aren't just dreams, they foreshadow his inevitable journey away from Caladan and into a destiny on a harsh new planet. Function 8, villainy. This is the direct action of the villain causing harm or misfortune. We see this brutally when the Harkonnens and Sardaukar destroy House Atreides. This act is the catalyst that sets Paul's heroic journey into motion. Function 15, guidance. The hero receives a magical agent or is guided to the object of their quest. After the fall of House Atreides, Paul and Lady Jessica seek refuge with the Freemen. Stilgar and the Freemen become the guides who lead Paul to his destiny on Arrakis. This structured progression is why Dune feels both epic and familiar, despite its complex world-building. It taps into a deep narrative pattern. Limitations in complex narratives. Propp's limitations. However, Propp's model, while powerful, isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, especially when we look at more complex postmodern narratives. Its inherent linearity can struggle with certain contemporary storytelling trends. Ambiguous endings. Think about the spinning top at the end of Inception. Does it fall or keep spinning? Propp demands a clear resolution where order is restored. Inception intentionally resists this, leaving the audience to ponder the reality, or lack thereof, of the ending. Ensemble casts. Propp's model is heavily focused on a single central hero. How do you apply it to a show like Game of Thrones, where the hero role is fractured across multiple, often morally ambiguous characters? Each character might have their own mini Proppian arc, but there's no single unifying hero whose journey dictates the entire narrative. Cultural hybridity. Propp's framework emerged from a specific cultural context, Russian fairy tales. When you encounter films like Pan's Labyrinth, which blends traditional fairy tale motifs with the brutal realities of historical trauma during the Spanish Civil War, Propp's often secular, clear-cut framework can struggle to account for the deeper, more unsettling ambiguities and cultural specificities. The fairy tale elements are there, but the overarching narrative isn't simply about a hero overcoming a magical villain. It's about coping with the horrors of war. So, while Propp offers an excellent model for many narratives, it's not always the perfect fit for the nuanced, multifaceted stories we often see today. First, Bremond's schemata, flexibility and branching narratives. Bremond's elementary sequences. This is where Claude Bremond comes in. A French semiotician, Bremond critiqued Propp's rigidity, arguing that narratives aren't just linear sequences, but rather networks of choices and possibilities. He proposed a more flexible model based on elementary sequences, a movement from potentiality, process, result. Decision points and role fluidity. Bremond's framework maps beautifully onto modern media's emphasis on character agency and the unfolding consequences of choices. Potentiality. This is where a choice or a new situation emerges, presenting a possibility for action. Think of Walter White's decision to cook meth in Breaking Bad. This isn't just an event, it's a monumental choice that opens up an entire world of narrative potential. Process. Once a choice is made, actions trigger cascading consequences. Characters' roles become fluid, shifting between helper and opponent roles. For Walter, his initial choice leads to a series of escalating actions, forming alliances with Jesse, clashing with Gus, and constantly renegotiating his position. Characters who were once helpers can become opponents, and vice versa, based on the evolving circumstances. Result. The outcome of these processes then spawns new potentialities. Walter's actions lead to the creation of Heisenberg, and ultimately, to his new identity, and the spin-off series Better Call Saul, focusing on the consequences and new narrative branches created by his actions and those around him. Interactive storytelling. Bremond's branching logic is perhaps most overtly embodied in interactive storytelling, particularly within video games. Interactive storytelling, Detroit Become Human. Games like Detroit Become Human are pure Bremond. The entire game is built around player choices that constantly open new narrative pathways. Role shifts. A character you saved in one playthrough as a bystander might, in a subsequent playthrough where you made different choices, become a crucial helper in later sequences, or even an opponent. The roles aren't fixed. They're dynamic and dependent on choices made. Degradation cycles. Bremond acknowledged that not all narratives lead to a happy resolution. His model includes the idea of degradation, where failed choices can lead to tragic endings. Detroit Become Human exemplifies this perfectly. Failed choices frequently lead to devastating, unresolved outcomes for the characters, reflecting Bremond's emphasis on the multitude of possibilities, not all of them positive. Case study Bremondian analysis. Let's look at The Last of Us 2023 HBO series, which powerfully demonstrates Bremondian sequences. Bremondian sequences. Joel's journey is a fantastic example of a character whose role constantly shifts. He starts as a subject, a protector trying to deliver Ellie to the Fireflies. But at the climax, he fundamentally shifts to an opponent, blocking the Fireflies' attempt to create a cure, effectively choosing Ellie's life over humanity's potential salvation. His role is fluid and contingent on his decisions. Branching ethics. The ending's profound moral ambiguity, saving Ellie versus dooming humanity, is a quintessential Bremondian moment. It mirrors Bremond's concept of amelioration, degradation, interplay. There isn't a clear good or bad outcome. Instead, there's a complex ethical choice with far-reaching consequences, leaving the audience to grapple with the different branches of morality. Bremond's model provides a more nuanced way to understand narratives where character agency, moral dilemmas, and the consequences of choices are paramount. 3. Comparative analysis, strengths and weaknesses. Propp vs. Bremond. Now that we've explored both frameworks individually, let's directly compare their strengths and weaknesses. Propp excels at dissecting narratives that follow a clear, predictable trajectory. If you're looking at a classic hero's journey, a straightforward genre film like a rom-com or a detective story, or indeed myths and fairy tales, Propp's functions provide an incredibly useful template. Its limitation, as we've seen, lies in its rigid sequencing and the tendency for characters to appear somewhat passive, simply fulfilling predetermined functions. Bremond, on the other hand, is ideal for analyzing complex television series, video games, and non-linear plots where choices, shifting roles, and alternative outcomes are central. Its strength is its flexibility. However, this flexibility can also be a limitation. For very simple, straightforward narratives, Bremond's model can feel overly abstract or unnecessarily complex, like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Let's consider The Mandalorian, Disney Plus, as an example that beautifully illustrates how both frameworks can apply. Proppian narratimis. At its core, The Mandalorian follows a clear Proppian structure. Din Djarin's quest to protect Grogu is a classic lack quest resolution arc. Grogu is the object of the quest, Din Djarin is the hero, and the villains, the Imperial remnants, Moff Gideon, provide the villainy that drives the plot. Each episode, and the overarching season, often resolves a specific lack related to Grogu's safety or Din's mission. Bremondian causality, yet the show's episodic structure and the evolving relationships also allow for significant Bremondian role fluidity. Think of Boba Fett's shift from an initial implied opponent, a notorious bounty hunter who might interfere, to a crucial ally. His actions and choices throughout the season change his relationship with Din Djarin and open new narrative branches, particularly with the introduction of the Pike Syndicate storyline. The series isn't just a linear quest, it's a series of unfolding choices and consequences. Synthesis hybrid applications. This brings us to a crucial point. Rather than being mutually exclusive, Propp and Bremond can often be applied in synthesis, revealing deeper layers of narrative construction. Layered narratives. Many contemporary films and shows utilize dual functional sequences, combining the best of both worlds. Let's return to Dune. Dual functional sequences. While we discussed its Proppian first act earlier, Dune also works on a layered narrative level, social myth level. On this grand scale, there's a clear Proppian struggle between House Atreides and the Empire Harkonnens. This is the epic conflict of good versus evil, or at least one house versus a more dominant villainous force, leading to a large-scale resolution, or lack thereof, setting up the sequel. Personal quest. Simultaneously, there's a Bremondian branching as Paul navigates his role as the Fremen Messiah. His visions, his choices to embrace or resist his destiny, and his interactions with various factions create multiple potentialities. Will he lead the Fremen to liberation? Will he succumb to the temptations of power? These are not preordained functions, but rather a series of unfolding choices with uncertain outcomes. Transmedia storytelling. The MCU. This hybrid application is particularly evident in transmedia storytelling, where narratives span across multiple platforms, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU. Phase 1 to 3. Linear Proppian Infinity Saga. The initial phases of the MCU, leading up to Avengers, Endgame, largely followed a grand overarching Proppian narrative. There was a clear lack, the Infinity Stones scattered, Thanos' threat, a prolonged struggle across multiple films, and a definitive resolution with the defeat of Thanos. Individual films within this saga often adhered to their own mini-Proppian structures. Phase 4-5, Bremondian Possible World. However, with Phase 4 and 5, the MCU has dramatically shifted into a more Bremondian possible world. Concepts like Loki's timeline fracturing introduce infinite potentialities and branching narratives. Choices made in one timeline can have ripple effects across others, creating new possibilities and challenging the idea of a singular, linear destiny. The emphasis is less on a single hero's journey and more on the consequences of choices and the exploration of alternative realities. This demonstrates how sophisticated storytellers can consciously or unconsciously leverage both frameworks to build expansive and engaging narrative universes. Decoding popular media. Case studies. Let's apply these concepts to a few more popular media examples to solidify our understanding. Black Panther 2018. Propp. Black Panther features a clear Proppian hero journey for T'Challa. There's significant villainy embodied by Killmonger's coup, disrupting the equilibrium of Wakanda. The resolution comes with T'Challa reclaiming the throne and opening Wakanda to the world. It's a very satisfying, structurally familiar narrative. Bremond. Yet the film also engages Bremondian complexity. Killmonger's potentiality, his challenge to Wakanda's isolationism, creates profound ethical ambiguity. He's not simply a one-dimensional villain. His motivations are understandable, and his challenge forces T'Challa and the audience to reevaluate the right path. This complicates the simple villain role and introduces a branching ethical dilemma. Succession, HBO. Propp's absence. Succession is a fantastic example of a narrative where Propp's framework is conspicuously absent. There's no clear hero, no ultimate resolution, and certainly no restoration of order. Instead, characters cycle relentlessly through helper-opponent roles, constantly betraying and allying with each other based on immediate self-interest. Bremond's dominance. This makes Succession profoundly Bremondian. Each power move, for example, Logan Roy's countless betrayals of his children, or Shiv's shifting loyalties, opens new branches of corporate warfare. The narrative is a complex web of choices, consequences, and unending potentialities, reflecting the character's constant striving for power without ever achieving a stable equilibrium. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, 2022. Propp's functions. At its heart, Evelyn's quest to save the multiverse and her family mirrors a fairy tale lack restoration arc. The lack is the looming destruction and the fractured family. The restoration is achieved through her embracing her multiversal self and reconnecting with her loved ones. Bremond's fluidity. However, the film is an explosion of Bremond's fluidity. The concept of infinite branching paths, the hot dog verse, the raccoon chef, the rock universe, embodies narrative potentiality in its most literal and imaginative form. Every choice Evelyn could have made leads to another reality, showcasing the boundless possibilities that Bremond's theory allows for. Conclusion. Complementary frameworks. So as we conclude, it's clear that Propp and Bremond offer complementary logic for analyzing media. Propp's functions are invaluable for decoding formulaic storytelling, helping us understand the structures that underpin many genre films and traditional narratives. They provide a clear, sequential map of a story's progression. Bremond's schemata, on the other hand, illuminate the complexity in advanced narratives, where character agency, choices, and multiple possibilities are foregrounded. They help us understand why stories feel less linear and more like a network of decisions. Final thought: understanding the evolving language of narrative. By applying both frameworks, scholars and creators can gain a much deeper understanding of how stories balance structural coherence with creative innovation. It allows us to appreciate both the comfort of familiar patterns and the thrill of unpredictable choices. This lecture has synthesized theoretical analysis with contemporary examples, demonstrating how Propp's and Bremond's work remain indispensable for dissecting the evolving language of narrative in our incredibly rich and diverse media landscape. Thank you.